The provincial government says it can't count on Ottawa to represent our interests abroad, so Saskatchewan's sending its own delegation to the UN climate talks in Dubai in a few weeks. And that could be pricey. The province is setting aside $750,000 for an event centre, and that doesn't include the flights or hotels. For more on this and the continued concerns over that carbon tax, we've reached our political panel. Adam Hunter covers politics for CBC Saskatchewan, and Murray Mandryk writes a political column in the Regina Leader Post. Hi, guys.
Good morning.
Adam, what's the latest on the trip to Dubai?
Well, not surprisingly, is the Premier's going, and he takes trips overseas more frequently than in past years, but he's been to Dubai, he's been to UAE in the last couple of years, and the government has signaled that they were going to have a big presence at COP. That was their words in their throne speech, so we're not surprised by that. What is a bit surprising is that price tag on this pavilion space at the conference, which is $765,000. And as you mentioned, doesn't count the travel of the Premier and his staff, and it doesn't count anything else for setup, for having people there working that pavilion space. So that's sort of the sticker shock that people have seen, and the government's justifying it. Mr. Jeremy Harrison's justifying it, saying, as you mentioned, federal government's not doing this promotion for us. Stephen Guilbeault, the Minister of Climate Change, isn't doing this. Prime Minister Trudeau isn't doing this, and he was pretty, adamant that this is something that Saskatchewan has to do. They have to be at the table. The opposition pointed out in question period yesterday that, well, Danielle Smith's going, and she's not renting a pavilion space. She's going with her staff, as the Premier is, and she doesn't feel the need. And Alberta seems to have similar beefs with the federal government, if not more, than Saskatchewan is a bigger province and maybe would have a bigger presence. The government says, well, we need the space for roundtable talks, for meetings, to help the 40 companies that are going, that do business in Saskatchewan, network and promote themselves and what they do. And without that, that would be a lost opportunity.
What do you make of this pavilion?
Well, the promotional part makes sense at any time because every province, whether we like it or not, has to trade internationally. We're a commodity-based province. We get all that. As Adam pointed out, this is the starting price at $765,000, and if it's for the 40 companies generally that are accompanying you, and if this is your justification, why are they not paying for it? Why are they not paying for part of it? As Adam pointed out, what about all the other costs? You need people to man it. You need people to be attracted there that work in United Arab Emirates. You need people on the ground. You need pre-trip stuff. This is just the tip of the iceberg. They're not being honest about the cost. They have told us nothing in advance about this. We found out about it through an order in council, which they legally have to reveal to pay for. And what we found out, generally speaking, is, oh, by the way, the mayor is going. And we're not really telling you how we're funding that, but we're funding it through a backdoor way where last March we gave the city mayors and the economic development offices for the two cities an extra $450,000 for these trips, and Mayor Masters, for reasons beyond my understanding, is going on this trip too, as she is with staff. Once again, they're going to need flight costs and security and everything else going. So this is a massive cost investment. And the problem that I see with it, Stephanie, is it seems the justification that we're getting from Jeremy Harrison is, I'm mad at Justin Trudeau and I'm mad at the federal environment minister because they're not promoting Saskatchewan enough. Well, that's not really their job. To be quite frank, and we get that you want to do your job, which is to promote economic opportunities and developments in Saskatchewan, but that's not their job. This can't be a situation where every time you get mad at Ottawa, stomp your feet and hold a little bit of a tantrum, you can use that as justification for spending taxpayers' money. You're still responsible as a minister of the government for the money you spend, the decisions you make. And once again, nothing is adding up here. If you are really serious about the need for this, well, why isn't the companies going, or other companies paying for at least a little tiny part of this table that you're buying in Dubai? And their inability to be forthright and honest just causes suspicions, and not just among us. I think this is where the public is getting a little bit cynical about the government, even some of their supporters. Yes, there's going to be people in the business community, donors, et cetera, they're going to say, there's the media again. They're attacking the poor government for doing its job, et cetera. Well, to be quite frank, I don't mind when they're doing their job and doing stuff. They travel way too much. It's silly, and it becomes an excuse for this, and my job is to critique that. But the fact of the matter is, I get that it's necessary. Do I get that this trip is necessary? Do I get that this expenditure is necessary? They've done nothing to make the case. They've hit it. They haven't even put out so much as one press release on this one, and that's problematic.
Beyond the cost, other listeners have said this sounds more like a trade mission or a business trip. This is a climate conference. What's the government doing about the climate?
And I asked Minister Harrison about that the other day. I said, why isn't the Minister of Environment going, Christine Tell? And he says, well, typically when we send the Premier, we don't have to send another minister there. But if the mayor's going, and that's, they're separating that from the city, the government is, then maybe there's a justification to send the Environment Minister or some staff from the. So that is a completely fair point. The government's case and the case they make is a business case. And it's a case that, well, when we burn fuel, when we, produce what we produce here, agriculture, innovation, when we are in a potash mine, we're using less fossil fuel. We're doing it cleaner than other countries, than countries that may be there, that you may be interested in buying from. That's our justification for being there, that we're doing it in a more ethical way, we're doing it in a safer way, we're doing it in a more responsible way. That's the environmental angle. But many people will be critical of the government's environmental record in Canada, that the record on what the Premier said about climate change. It's come out, the opposition said, well, the Premier's made comments about not caring about climate change. This year, the government said, well, we don't take our advice from the UN when it comes to what we do. We're the government of Saskatchewan. So that's completely fair. That's a completely fair criticism, I think. And as I said, the Minister of Environment isn't going. The staff from the Environment Ministry isn't going. But a lot of environment topics, when they're asked, are answered by the Minister of Trade and Export and the Premier. We almost never see the Minister of Environment, no matter who it is, up in question period answering questions about environmental topics. Those are economic questions answered by the Premier typically.
And that's been pretty much the case since the Saskatchewan Party was elected. I think that we heard more from Brad Wall or Bill Boyd as an energy minister than we heard from Scott Moe, a previous environment minister.
You seem to have a lot of economic development ministers, only one officially. I can't remember their environment ministers so much. The problem being is Adams describes, there's actually two conferences going on. And what they want to attend, where they're buying this table, pavilion, whatever you want to call it, is for the sideshow conference that is being put on by the UAE government, basically to promote opportunities. And as Adam outlined, in fairness, let's promote those. If we have an ability to say, look, we can our potash, our oil is better because it's mined cleaner, or it's pulled out of the ground cleaner than it is in China, in Russia, who, by the way, don't have a great human rights record, who by the way, are invading other countries in a way that isn't too good. Make that case. And maybe this is the place to make that case to a certain extent. But the very fact that other provinces, as Adam pointed out, like Alberta, don't seem to think there's a need to make this particular case, the very fact that there's this disinterest in anything really related to the climate issue, as we talked about, in terms of their environmental promotion at home, in terms of what they're talking about. Quite frankly, they haven't even talked about this conference or going to this conference in any meaningful way. There's been no press conferences, no press releases. We find out through an order in council. We ask about who else is going and how you're paying for it, and we get the runaround and mealy-mouthed, borderline dishonest answers from communication in government about, well, we're not really paying for third parties, except, by the way, we did fund those third parties through in the case of Regina, it's Economic Regina Office, Economic Development Regina Office. So they make the decision to send themselves and to send staff going, but we are, by the way, we're footing the bill. Well, no, just be honest about why you're going and what you're doing, and maybe you'll develop a little bit more public trust in terms of some of these decision-making. Jeremy Harrison did not sound like he was a minister working for the people of Saskatchewan when we scrummed him the other day. He sounded like an angry opposition federal minister. Now, I expect he wants to be if he could win a nomination or such, but that right now is not his job. His job right now is to represent Saskatchewan interests. He outlined in theory how he's doing that, but we don't know if it's going to be successful. We don't know what's going to come out of it. We do know It's exceedingly costly to do this. And when it's exceedingly costly, maybe there has to be extra scrutiny and justification for doing that. That doesn't sound unreasonable to me. Like, I mean, if you're spending close to $1 million, which it will be by the time all the bills are in. I think, Adams, you said the Premier's last trip to Dubai was $65,000?
Yeah, it's over $60,000, and Dubai is probably the most expensive place they can go. Jeremy Harrison did go there a couple of years ago, and it was half that cost and it could be different reasons for that, but it's not going to be a cheap trip even with 4 staffers and the Premier.
These are costly, and if you're going to be spending that kind of money, show us your work. Show us what you're doing. Show us why you're going. Show us what you're going to accomplish. Show us whom you're going with and get them to pay for the table.
Thanks, you guys.
You're welcome.